So in the last video, we looked at communities representing naturalistic forms of traditional religions. Now, let's look at those unattached to any particular tradition or secular altogether. Spiritual ecology, ancient philosophy, of which we'll discuss Stoicism as one example, humanism, and other paths. First, let's talk about spiritual ecology, a broad movement which bears much overlap with eco-spirituality, eco-psychology, deep ecology, and Gaianism. All of these seek a spiritual dimension to the current environmental crisis, such that action without this deeper dimension may be seen as mere slashing at the branches. And the roots of this movement can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution, or even further back to the beginnings of modern science, which has historically tended toward a view of nature as a resource to be controlled and utilized by and for humanity. There are signs that this is beginning to change, but historically that has been the case. In contrast, spiritual ecologists cultivate a view which is not anthropocentric, but ecocentric, seeing humans as but one species within a larger, interdependent ecosystem. Spiritual ecology has since been pursued both within traditional religions, developing new earth-friendly theologies, and outside it, within science, academia, and political activism. Practices include environmental living and activism, spending time in nature. Some also draw on techniques inspired by religions, especially indigenous traditions, as well as transpersonal psychology. Of central importance are various practices aimed at widening circles of concern to include all nature, or what David Abrams calls the more than human world. One example practice is a kind of ritual called the Council of All Beings, in which participants imaginatively adopt the perspective of a specific non-human species and then speak from that species' perspective with the aim of broadening views beyond habitual anthropocentric limitations. Some prominent figures include Aldo Leopold, a conservationist, Arnas, a deep ecologist, Thomas Berry, an ex-Catholic geologian as he describes himself, Joanna Macy, a Buddhist, Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, a Sufi, Charlene Spretnak, an ecofeminist, and Vandana Shiva, also an ecofeminist. And to learn more about this community, the website spiritualecology.org is a good place to start. Next, we can talk about ancient philosophy. Now, unlike most of modern philosophy, which tends to focus on ever more precise analyses of problems, ancient philosophy was about transforming your life in accord with ideals and bore considerable overlap with what we now call spirituality. It would take too long to discuss all the different schools from Greece and India and China, so we'll just focus on one example that happens to command a significant following even today, an ancient Greek school called Stoicism. Stoicism began around the late 4th, early 3rd century BCE with Zeno of Citium. Its central idea is an ethical message of virtuous living in accord with reality. This is encapsulated in the metaphor of a dog tied to a moving cart. The dog can pull against the cart, but will be dragged along anyway, producing suffering for itself in the process. How much better is it then to go with the cart? Stoicism takes this approach to life, flowing with reality rather than against it, not desiring things that cannot be, nor getting upset at how things are, but rather using reason to change what we can change while accepting what we cannot. Now, like Buddhism, Stoicism is a product of its time and bears the stamp of that day and age. The universe is divinized as the divine logos, or rational principle, sometimes anthropomorphized as Zeus or other gods, and this is often interpreted as a kind of consciousness pervading the cosmos. But others see it more as an impersonal, abstract principle, much like the laws of nature. Stoics in Hellenistic Greece tended toward the former, while those of the Roman period tended instead to de-emphasize the theistic elements and concentrate on the essentially secular message of virtuous living in accord with reality. And among today's Stoics, both camps flourish, with atheists being common. Stoic practices center around behaving only in ways that accord with reality. There is a kind of mindfulness called prosoche, in which all thoughts and impulses are carefully measured against this principle. Other practices include a kind of widening circles of concern called oikeosis, as well as meditating in the morning to anticipate the challenges of the day ahead and prepare to respond with virtue, and meditating in the evening to reflect upon the day's successes as well as continuing challenges. Some notable figures in Stoicism today include fighter pilot and POW James Stockdale, cognitive therapist Donald Robertson, philosopher Massimo Pigliucci, blogger Pamela Daw, scholar and lawyer Laura Inman, and B.T. Strain, founder of the Spiritual Naturalist Society. To learn more about Stoicism, a good place to begin is the website of the podcast Stoically Speaking, which has links to most of the best Stoic sites. Now let's talk about humanism. Humanism, in its broadest sense, is a philosophy that gives central importance to human concerns, as opposed to divine concerns. It began in Renaissance Europe, though similar philosophies might be identified in other times and places, and has seen many different versions, some religious and others naturalistic. The one most popular today is secular humanism, which is entirely naturalistic. And it differs from many other atheist and agnostic movements in that it concentrates not only on what it does not believe in, but also on what it does, ethical living and activism. Now, not all forms of secular humanism fit under the umbrella of spiritual naturalism. Most seem actually reluctant to speak of spirituality or engage in practices like meditation and ritual, perhaps perceiving these as too reminiscent of religion. But nevertheless, there are some humanists open to this, and in any case, the central idea of living a meaningful life of moral activity is very much in consonance with humanism. Generally, secular humanism tends to emphasize responsibility and joyful living within a society of civil liberties, freedom of and from religion. And practices include various forms of activism, especially involving civil liberties, but also charity work, compassion, and environmentalism. Recall that the human in humanism contrasts with the divine, not with nature. Many humanists are, in fact, quite active in the environmental sphere. Now, of the many notable figures in humanism, a few include author Greg Epstein, online teacher Jennifer Hancock, soon-to-be-published author Rick Heller, as well as John Dietrich, one of the first to bring humanism into the Unitarian Universalist community. And if you want to learn more about humanism, the American Humanist Association is a good place to start. Finally, there are a variety of other paths worth mentioning. One is naturalistic pantheism, which identifies the divine with the material universe itself and cultivates awe and wonder for the cosmos. And the website of the World Pantheist movement is a good place to learn more about that. Another is transhumanism, which embraces values similar to humanism but looks especially to technology as a means of improving ourselves and even transcending our biophysical nature. See the website humanityplus.org for a start on that. Finally, there are those who identify spiritual naturalism itself as their path. Usually, these folks prefer the term religious naturalism, but the core ideas are identical. Now, compared to the Spiritual Naturalist Society, such folks tend to focus less on practice and more on awe and wonder, and the epic of evolution may play a large role in their spirituality. Some notable authors include Ursula Goodenough, Jerome A. Stone, Donald Crosby, Loyal Rue, and Tom Clark. The Institute on Religion in the Age of Science has an annual conference, as well as a journal called Zygon, and its website is a good place to find out more. I also highly recommend Tom Clark's website, naturalism.org. There is one more possibility for a spiritual naturalist that must be addressed, and that is the self-blazed trail. Since such a path is inevitably unique to each person, not much can be said about it except that it is a perfectly valid option. Now, regardless of what communities you choose to explore, one final tip is this. Take care to build your path slowly. Don't judge these traditions too quickly. Don't judge after just one try. Some may take a long time to click with you, so to speak, and some may use mythic language that may not be to your preference, but to judge them too quickly would surely be to miss out on the wisdom they have to offer. Give them the time and attention they deserve before deciding whether they are right for you or not. Okay, to sum up, spiritual naturalism offers a diversity of communities and paths. Each can be explored like different peaks offering unique perspectives on a common valley. Each has its differences while contributing to the whole.